It's new toy. So we're going to talk about updates. I call it from fear to freedom because what I discovered during my time as a TAM is that people really fear Drupal updates. And it becomes a big thing. I even have CTOs telling me that they were tired of paying $160 an hour just for updates and asking me if I could ask Acquia to stop the freaking Drupal updates. So not only I had to explain that Acquia is not Drupal, it's like you need updates. You need to keep them up to date. But they don't have to be complicated. And I started this talk in Florida camp. Like you can see that I did not update for mid-camp, but we are at mid-camp. My name is Carlos Ospina. I used to be a technical account manager at Acquia. I came out, like when people started asking me what I want to do after being a TAM, I came out saying like I feel like I'm a Drupal architect, because that's what I did in Acquia. I will guide the architect of the teams to architect the solutions, kind of a bigger kind of view, including the servers and other stuff that is not just Drupal. We are starting a company called Palcera. It's from Colombia. It's a group of Colombian people. Palcera comes from Palma de Cera, or wax palm, which is the national tree of Colombia, and parcero, which means friends. So let's. The first thing that we have to think about when we don't do upgrades is that you are creating technical debt. There is a cost of waiting for the update. So we know Drupal and every software that is honest will release updates every time there is a problem. And we're hoping that, and that happens in Drupal. What happens if you don't do it? If you get one version behind, that's manageable, right? Like you can do the next update, you will be okay. If you go 2 minor versions, you are growing your technical debt. It's going to become more complicated. But there are so many companies that really go minor versions, multiple minor versions, and major versions of Drupal behind. And at that point, as we were talking, you're going to find pitfalls. And really, it becomes a snowball effect, right? You don't do the update. When you want to do the update, it's too much, so you don't do it. You're good. Your site is working, but new versions keep coming, and Drupal keeps moving. We are in a better moment right now since Drupal announced LTS. So Drupal 10 is going to be maintained through 2026. Drupal 11 is already stable. So we are not going to be in such a rush to move between major versions anymore. And we will talk about this more. If you are up to date on your Drupal 10, you will be okay to move to Drupal 11 because everything is being backported. The longer you wait, you have more complex updates, you have higher security risk, and this is the biggest part that people forget. It's like, oh, my site is working. Yes, but do you want a porn site instead of your site? Because it's going to happen eventually if they find you. And if you all are working on web, you realize, you know that after the pandemic, something happened. I think the hackers had too much time for a year. And stopping bots, stopping hacks, stopping scalpers has become a really, really big problem. And then you throw AI into the mix and it's worse. So it's better to stay up to date. And of course, if your update is way behind, it's not going to be a couple hours of work to update. It becomes a 50, 60, even 100 hours of work. So, working with my customers in Acquia and thinking about this a lot, I created what I call a systematic approach. So I kind of actually have a system on how I approach updates, and it's a 2 phases kind of approach. The first one is to get you into a stable point, a stable moment. If you're in a Drupal 8 right now, I will take you to Drupal 10.4. That is taking you to a stable point, and then it's just a process of maintenance, right? Like if you're on the latest one, updates should be very easy. Composer update, Drush DB, Drush CEX if you feel you need it, and deploy. So the first phase is getting the foundation, which is making sure your composer does not have any locked versions. That is a big one. When you see a composer with locked versions for any package, you have a problem. Updates are going to become a problem. You can handle little minor versions, but probably a major version is going to be stuck because you are locked. So if you are using locked packages, that's the first thing we need to fix, whether it's updating a custom module, it's doing whatever needs to be done so you don't depend on a specific version of a package, custom module or anything. A well-maintained patch inventory. And this is something I saw in different customers. They use patches, right? Like, I want to fix this problem instead of getting the new version. And even worse, using local patches. You know, they create their own patch and put it in a little folder inside Drupal. That is terrible. Yes, it's more performant in terms of the deploying, but it's terrible because there is no maintenance on that patch. If you have to re-roll the patch, if Drupal changes or the module changes and your patch doesn't apply, that is a problem. If you are upgrading to a version that already has the patch, you don't know if that is fixing, and especially if you did your own patch and the actual fix is a different approach. So know what are you patching and when you're patching, so know your code. Keep a clean repository. And of course, if you are not using Drupal CMS, which is a different target, be aware of your configuration manager. So, what do you need to do on this phase one? Like, you have an old website, and when I talk about this, I'm thinking a Drupal 8 site that sometimes we find in the wild, or a Drupal 9 site. The first thing is, what are the version gaps that you are having? How back you are? Very important, inventory. Take note of the custom modules and themes that you're using. You need to know who they depend on. You are going to need, that will help you identify what may cause an issue. If you have experience already with, you've been in Drupal for a while, sometimes there are modules that can be a little bit more trickier than others to update. But very important, if you have custom modules, document the API usage that your modules are doing. And I'll give you an example. I have this customer that upgraded from 10.1 to 10.2. And they had a custom module working with conditional fields. So why they decided to extend conditional fields, I will never understand, because they did not need to do that, but they did. And when they updated, put it in production, the module stopped working. They came to me, we started looking at it, and I discovered, luckily, more than being good, is there was a change record in the Form API. And Form API has the hashtag states. And in that record, from 10.1 to 10.2, they move hashtag states into a different place of the object or the variable, right? So their module was still using the old one. So it's PHP. They can create another hashtag states wherever they want. The module will give no errors, no problems whatsoever. But what it was changing was in a completely different place that Drupal was looking for it. So if they had a inventory of their APIs and do the upgrade, then they could go into the change records and making sure, okay, we use Form API extensively, go search change records and see if there is anything special that I have to do. Of course, review the the relevant Drupal and module change records, because that, once you know what APIs you are using, that can tell you if you're going to have one of these issues. And I love that example because there was no error. If you get an error, that's easy. But if you don't get an error, you don't know what's going on. And of course, use the upgraded status module. The upgraded status module is a great help. It works since Drupal 8, probably on version 3 of the upgraded status. And we're going to see a little screenshot hopefully, if I have the time. But it shows you where you are on your environment, where you are on the current modules, where you are on your custom modules, allows you to check your custom modules and identify all the errors or possible problems that you have, etc. Once you are there, you follow phase one, you inventory everything, you update to Drupal 10. Your update should be very simple. Code updates via Composer, database updates via Drush, then configuration management if you need it, test, QA, deploy. Always match production code and database versions, so make sure when you are working locally, you are using the latest that you have in production. We tend to have, our different stages, live and staging, and I have a customer that have like 6 different sandbox 1, sandbox 2, security 1, and sometimes those get mismatched. And I've seen cases where somebody runs the updates in a previous version of production, or never test locally, bring in a clean production database and see if update DB is going to work, if your configuration when you import it is going to work, if you have conflicts, etc. And always export configuration when needed if you are managing configuration. So it's pretty simple. If you run Drush UpDB and you read the Drush UpDB as you should, it's very obvious sometimes like some configurations change. This is important because the same customer, they were very interesting. In the same update, the other thing that happened is half of the sites died. And when we went to see the logs, basically Drupal was saying that it did not know what to do with a variable that I believe is a stale file threshold. And it had it. What was the problem? Again, change record said that that variable that was in performance, in system.performance, was gone. We don't need it anymore. We took it out. They did the update, did not export configuration. So their configuration had that variable in the configuration, came into Drupal, and then Drupal went like, what do I do with this? And died. So exporting configuration when there are those kind of changes is very important. Always follow the order. Don't try to update from 9.1 to 9.4. I truly advise go 9.1, 9.2, 9.3 before going to 9.4. And this is another thing that I found out with customers and agencies, and actually agencies do this a lot, is they make the update process part of the normal development. And it's not. Updates are a hotfix. Updates are out of your sprint. They can be in the sprint, but they are their own process. They need to be a standalone process. Once somebody starts an update, the update needs to go full circle, needs to get to the new version, needs to update, it needs to be deployed, and then everybody in the sprint should be informed, pull code, because we run updates. When you just put it like one of the tickets, is when you get 3 or 4 people working with an old version of Drupal and just one working with the modern version. And then when you try to reconcile that, if by accident you touch the same configuration or the same module, or somebody added a new module in Composer, you can see what kind of hell you're going to have to do that. So updates are in a hotfix cycle. They should be in a hotfix cycle. Somebody starts the update, that person finished the update. By following this, I was able, one of my customers was a big government agency. 5 people that were not developers. They were designers and took over Drupal. And after we finished this, either of them, the updates become who's running updates today, and one of them will say I, and they will run updates for 15 sites. And we never had an issue after we finished this. So there is something that and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but there is something that I call a stable point. Like a stable point is you got to a version. You were in 9.1 and you got to 9.2. the latest 9.2, and everything is working, you fix your custom modules, all your configuration is okay, you can bring the database from production that is 9.1, you can run DB, you can import configuration, and the site is working as expected. That is a stable point. If you're doing a large update, on those points, you have to follow the full cycle. So release to production, tell everybody, now we are in 9.2, get the code, and then you can start the next update to 9.3, as an example. Making sure your team is synchronizing everything, code and databases. I've seen this a lot where we inform people get the code, never update the database, they use the same database, they've been working locally, they deploy something, configurations that should not be there appear on the code, configurations that should be there disappear from the code immediately or from production, because when you import configuration, remember that code is what is the boss of what says what should be imported, and whatever is not there is going to disappear from your database. Drupal is not going to go like, this didn't change, I'm going to leave it. And we are preventing accidental overrides of the update. So this is the first thing that I did. I see the updates as a time travel. There is a concept that took us to Drupal 8. If you are in Drupal old enough to remember, Drupal 5 to 6, 6 to 7, and 7 to 8, that's when it changed. But the philosophy was, we want the latest technology, we don't care about upgrade path. And that was the approach. On Drupal 8, that idea changed. If maybe upgrades are important, so we are going to follow a more stable path and moving into major versions. Why is this important? Because one of the philosophies that was defined at the time is whatever lives at that time is compatible. So if you have a version of Drupal 8 and a version of Drupal 9 that were released, like we'll see the example in a second, 8.9.20, the latest Drupal 8, was released on November 17, 2021, and you have two versions of Drupal 9 released at the same date. That means there was a security update, we do the security update in every living version of Drupal, and they are all compatible. So it stands to reason that if I am on 8.9.20, I should be easily able to upgrade to 9.114. Now, if I want to go to 9.3, that's a different story because there is a time gap there and something might have changed. So you are in for some pain. So for me, it's a time travel, so you need to be aware of the versions and the time where you're living. And imagine that if you have a Drupal 8.9.20 site, you're living in 2021. So you need modules that live in 2021, you need base themes that live in 2021, you need another version of Drupal that lives in 2021. So as I said, module compatibility also follows those timelines, right? If I release as a module maintainer a module in November, December 2021, it stands to reason that module is fully compatible with any Drupal version that was alive at the time. So I can use that version to ensure my process doesn't have a problem. We are going to show like an example later, but how do we make this actually practical, right? First, we need to understand, or I believe we need to understand that there are stopping points and there are stable points. The stopping points is when I'm doing the update and I discover that moving a given module from one version to the next killed my custom module. That's a stopping point. I need to stop, I need to pre-release this update, and ask the developers to update the module, or me updating the module, to making sure it's compatible to the point where I am.
Does that mean you're running tests at every step of the way from 9.1 to 9.2?
You should. As I said, every update needs to be I'm not saying you need to run deep test, but you should identify when you have a problem. And these are very evident very quick, right? Because if it is a custom module that is not working with the API, most of them are going to give you errors. Again, as I said, keep an inventory of your API, because like the form API, an API can change that way, and it's not going to work. It's not going to give you any hints. It's just going to fail. But what I'm saying is, if I start in Drupal 8.9.20, my first stopping point is not 10.4. My first stopping point is when I have an actual issue on a custom module or a custom theme. Whether I have to just add the constraint for Drupal 10, whether I actually have to change anything that upgraded status identified, or the module is giving an error. I have to do a stopping point, and that's for me just a stopping point. I have to stop here. I cannot continue my update until we fix that error. I do it this way because I'm a believer that in computers, when you have an error and you have warnings, most of the time those previous warnings are related to the final error. And you don't realize it. It can be in different modules, different places, different computers, and they're actually related. And that has happened to me since I started doing computers, even in the little Ataris I started in 1987. So if you get to a problem, that's a stopping point. But then there are stable points. I actually got from 8.9.20 to 9.4 without issues. I went through 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4. I'm lucky, my custom modules were very well done, and I didn't have any issues. That's a stable point. I'm on an actual version, everything is working, I need to release that. I don't want to go to 10 because now I'm pretty far away. I will argue that some stable points can be from 8.9.20 to 9.1, the latest 9.1. And if you want to be more careful, you have more custom modules, your project is a little bit more complex, that will be what is called a stable point. And that means you need to release that to production. You need to release, test that in production. It needs to go live, and everybody in your team should start using that database and that code, and making sure there are. That's for me a stable point. I successfully managed a step in the update. So that's the difference for me between stable points and stepping points. And you're going to notice that I have like video clips times here in the presentation. I actually did like an hour and a half, sadly, video with Nora, where we updated a site from 8.9.13 to, well, we got to 9.4, but the process is described there, and we did it completely. So, at this stable point, is what I was saying, you have to create a database snapshot, you have to commit code changes, you have to document what the state of that stable point, know what you did, know what changed, especially if you have to change custom modules, and you'll see it in a second in an example, or you find a little module that is kind of tricky, and I have a perfect example. And this is good because you can roll back. So if you keep moving in your update and it fails, you can always have the snapshot of the database, you can always have the snapshot of the code, Git, and go back. Deploying updates, again, and I cannot repeat this enough, updates should be their own thing. You get to a point where you feel you are stable in an update, you need to release that to production. You do every step of the way. So sometimes 8.9 to 9.1, that's a big one, probably that's a stable point. 9.1 to 9.2, no issues, simple code. Maybe you can keep going to 9.3. But if you feel you got to a successful point, a stable point, always need to go full cycle and become part of life. And then you can continue the process, especially if you're on the phase one, right? Like you are getting to a point where at the end your updates are going to be easy. Always make sure your team synchronizes. They need to get a new database from prod. You cannot imagine how many times a developer came back and messed up a production site because it's working in my local. We know that, right? Why? Because they have an old database that they already changed. Their configuration in the database was completely different, and of course it was perfect. But it did not follow the update, and something exploded. And everybody needs to rebase the update changes, even if you're in the middle of a sprint. So think about that. When you get a security update, this is a hotfix. That should happen immediately. Especially when you are already in the latest version. Should happen immediately, and everybody that is working in the code should be informed, hey, we just released a new update your code, update your database, make sure you're working in what we need to be working, or what version we need to be working. So I have the full practical video, if you want to see it. We really go very slow, and I try to explain all of this very slow, because I speak fast and I think I have an accent. And we do it. So everything is going to be there. Did everybody get it? Oh.
No, 1 second.
Let me know when I can go forward. Don't worry. Are we good? One more.
I'm good.
Let's go. So, there are different things that you need to set up, especially if you're on Drupal 8. And I'm going to show an example in a second. In Drupal 8, when we started Composer, we used the project called Drupal project. Then we moved into Drupal recommended project. Drupal recommended project is what is used in Drupal 9, Drupal 10, and Drupal 11 if you're starting a new project. But you're going to find, let me see if I can show you, this. This is, let's see if I can do it. This one is the original Composer, and it's Drupal-project. And you're going to see down here, it's not showing it because it changed my size. So let me scroll. The main difference is that the old one is going to use Drupal core, and the new one is going to use Drupal core recommender and Composer scaffold. If you're on Drupal 8, the first thing that I recommend doing is converting your Composer to this. And it sounds very complicated, but it's not. You can start a new project empty in somewhere with Drupal Composer recommended version 8. It will start it clean, and then you just add your modules and whatever patches you are using or special configurations you have. But this is a very important first step. And I like it because it shows, make sure your Composer is right. Make sure your Composer is aligning to what Drupal 10 and Drupal 11 is expecting. Why? Same advice I gave my customers with support. We work on the N+1 cases. All of us in open source. We're not solving specific cases. We're solving the common case, right? So if changes are done to Composer or the way we use Composer in the future, they're going to be done thinking on this that we assume everybody has. But if you are on a version like this, that may not be compatible. So can you go through this to Drupal 10? Yes, probably. It's Composer, it's just bringing code, but may give you a problem in the future if we do some changes.
Can you speak briefly to this as well as changing versions of the Composer versions that you're using, because that seems relevant. Right?
That is very true. Right now it's only true in Drupal if you are in Drupal 8, because Drupal 8 was Composer 1, and it's also very different. And actually, if you created your Composer with Composer 1, I believe in the latest version of Composer 2 they fixed that, and they kind of do a little upgrade or understanding all Composer 1 files. But for the longest time, if you remember, you will run composer2 on a composer1 composer.json. How many times I've said composer? And it will give you an error. But that is true. It's also that problem. If a composer version gets updated, this format can change. But most likely, let's say Composer 3 comes out with Drupal 12 at the same time, and this changes, most likely we're going to have an upgrade path from this format to the new version, not from this format. So anyway, this is to show if you start, the first step is make sure your composer is clean, is well organized, according to what we're using right now. You have composer installers, you need composer installers, you want to have the composer installers extra. I don't know if it shows there, but I believe everybody knows. If you're using patches, you want CWiggens, patches, extension, making sure you have everything. Something interesting that you're gonna find, I'm not gonna talk about that in the presentation, is this baby. Because you may have the old one. We started with an old package for scaffolding, and then we moved to Drupal core composer scaffolding. But if you're here, you don't have scaffolding yet. Everybody knows what is the scaffolding for composer? Yeah.
When you have patches for core, do you have to rename them so they apply to core recommended, or is it?
No. Core recommended is just a package that will install core and core dev as needed. In here, you're calling them directly. In here, you're using this to bring the right versions of all the packages. So no, you just do the same patch to Drupal core. What you need to do is to have an inventory of every patch you're doing. Because this is what happens. If you use especially the old patches, and for some reason, when we get the, I'm going to call it the issue farming people, they come and issue farming with patches. And people is using the old version of patches still. So, if you remember the old version, we use patches per comment. So if the patch got updated, you had to go and change the URL of the patch to get the right patch from the right comment. Nowadays it's way better because we have merge requests. You just need the merge request. And the merge request is going to be updated every time somebody pushes. As a matter of fact, I recommend everybody, if you have a patch and it's one of those comment patches, make it a merge request. It's going to make your life easier. Just create the merge request, apply the same patch, and just push it. And then people can work on that. But anyway, yeah, you don't need to change the patches. Of course, for local, I recommend using DDEV or a similar tool. Actually not, just use DDEV, really. Lando has become really convoluted and weird to do the stuff that we do here. Be careful with your proper PHP version management, because that's going to be another source of pain. I just fixed a site that I was talking about. It is in 9.5, moved them to 10.1, and a whole functionality just stopped because we moved to PHP 8.2. And it was 2 tiny errors that we were getting, but it stopped the whole custom module. So properly manage your PHP, make sure in which version you are, and what can be, the changes, the deprecated changes. And always run Composer inside the DDEV environment.
Inside DDEV is what you mean?
Yes, because in DDEV you can set, like you mentioned that, if you are on Drupal 8. You get older. You said you had an 8.6. If you're on an 8.6, you have to keep going 8.7, 8.8, 8.9 before even thinking about 9, and that would be Composer 1. So if you're using DDEV and you use the Drupal 8 recipe, it's going to bring Composer 1. It's going to be perfect. It's going to bring the right one. You can configure it to use Composer 1. But the moment you run a Composer update with your Composer 2, especially, I'm pretty sure they fixed that and now kind of does an upgrade, your future to 8.9 is just broken. Or it's a pain. I mean, you have Git and you can go back, but anyway, challenges. Always use a systematic approach. Composer conflict messages. I wanted to create a good one of those conflict messages to show. I'll be honest, I could not. But do not fear, this is what happens with Composer. When one module conflicts with another, the then conflict message is going to start showing either at the beginning or the end what is exactly the actual conflict, but in the middle, it's going to try all the versions. And that's why you get those long, long lists that are overwhelming. If you read them carefully, and if it's Drupal core, you're going to see it's required in Drupal core 8. I can find Drupal core 8.1, it connects that. I can find 8. Core 7, I can find core 9, I can find it doesn't work, I can find core this, and it doesn't work. It try all of them, and for some reason it prints them out. So usually in conflict messages on Drupal, the actual conflict is on the top, is the first one, or one of the 3 first ones, or the 3 last ones. So look for what is different. If Composer, if core is named several times, it's a module that doesn't have compatibility with that core. Find what modules are named. And it will be just 1 or 2 lines. So sorry I could not give an example, but keep in mind that it looks overwhelming, but if you look closely, it's a lot of repeating lines. Look for the lines that are different. And solve one problem at a time. Don't worry, you don't have to solve all of them. So if you have 2 or 3 conflicts, as soon as you find one, go fix it, bring the right module, run the Composer update. Do not fear Composer. Composer only brings the code. Composer is not affecting your site until you run DrushUpDB. Your site, your database is safe. Nothing has happened to Drupal, really. Just the code is different. And Composer is in Git. So if something really goes bad, your Composer log goes crazy, your composer.json is completely out of whack, go to the previous commit where it was working and start again. So don't fear Composer because it's just code, it's just text. And it's easy to, fix with Git. So this is one of the biggest problems you're going to have, and I'm actually going to show a little piece of the video here. Now I am in the wrong place because I needed to do this. Just so you have an idea of the video, very quick, if the internet allows us.
I want 1.7 update.
Well, let's see if I can make it sound.
So the captcha module got updated to a different version. The layout builder restrictions, the shield module, the web form module, just SEO, and then there is some other stuff that can be
So at this point,
can be there
we
because
got to a
sometimes
point,
minor versions may have
and there is
some
some
updates.
DrushUpDB. We're good. Everything looks
Patch
okay.
versions. But this is what is interesting. When I run Composer update, I had a problem. Somebody's giving me an error. Now, in here, always read this little red thing. It's gonna tell you who is the culprit.
This was after you ran the update.
Composer update. Immediately, it run a little bit, telling me update completed, update completed for just SEO, right?
But then it gave an error.
Then
So
I got an error. And
As-
it's telling
as I was doing this morning, I realized in the video I spoke very slow because I know the captions and that stuff don't like me. So this takes longer, but just SEO is a beautiful module to show an example of a module that is going to give you errors in an update. And I've been meaning to send a little patch, but this is what happens with just SEO. And I'm going to go back to the actual releases. And look at this beauty. So mostly, when you are updating and you're using Composer, you can trust the module maintainers to have the right constraints in their modules in their own Composer. So what this means is, if I'm on Drupal 8, right? Even if they have a version released yesterday, the only version Composer is going to get, if the constraints are managed correctly, is the version that is compatible with 8. Because Composer is your friend. But Then I found this little baby. January 2025, compatible with 8, 9, 10, and 11. That's a lie. That is absolutely impossible. You cannot be compatible with all of them because either you don't have code in your code, or you're not even paying attention to constraints. And that's what happened when I ran Composer update on that little site that is still on 8.9.20. It brought the latest version that was compatible according to Composer. And it brought a 2025 version. And remember I said this is a time travel thingy? 2021 to 2025, lots of changes. So what do you have to do? And for that, again, I have it in the same place. For that, I'm going to move a little bit faster. You have to choose the right version. And it's something that Nora, not me, called version release date matching. And this is going to be your friend, right? So I have an example with Drupal core. Drupal core 8.9.20 was released the other way. Drupal 9.1.14 and Drupal 9.29 were released at the same day, November 17, 2021, that Drupal 8.9.20, which stands to reason I should be able to move to 9.1.14 or 9.29 without any issues. Why? Because when they did that, the team made sure you didn't have any issues, right? In November 17, 2021, when XJM released this, she made sure they really were compatible. So I will move to 9.1 because it doesn't make any sense. Then I will go to the latest 9.1, that was 9.1.15, and will do the same version matching, which was 9.2.10. And I can move from this one to this one without issues. All the update hooks are going to work. Everything is going to work, except that you have an edge case in your custom modules. But you can read all the change records between these two versus your inventory of your APIs, and you can know if you need to change something. And then you can go to the latest 9.2 and go to the version that was released at the same day of 9.3. So when you do version release date matching, you can find the right versions that are compatible. And now Joe's SEO gave us that problem. So all I have to find is a version of Joe's SEO that was released around the time of my time travel. So November 2021. Let me see if I put it here. So let's talk about the story of that Drupal update. First, the Composer was created with Drupal project, not Drupal recommended, so I did the change. Easy change, Composer create project, Drupal recommended version A, copy the composer.json, everything is text, so just copy your modules in whatever configuration, and you just convert your composer.json. And it should work exactly with the same versions. Second, if you are moving across versions, use version release date matching. Remember, you are in a time travel. So you are in November 2021. If something gives you a problem, it needs to be taken back to November 2021, like the Joe's SEO. To get stopping and stable points, you have ddev. So commits for the code, ddev export db for the database. So what happens? You can test something that you believe is going to help you. Didn't, you can go back, try another approach. And today, in the presentation that I did, we don't have custom modules, but I'm going to show this very quick in a second. If you have custom modules, trust Cloud AI. I've tried many, but Cloud AI has been very interesting with Drupal. And you can actually tell Cloud AI, go look at my custom modules if you're using the file system API, MCP, sorry. Go and look at my custom modules and give me an inventory of every Drupal and contrib module API that is used. And it will tell you. So now you have a way to follow change records, right? So this is version matching. So Joe's SEO, so you have, on this side you have core 8.9.20. On this side you have Drupal 9 releases. And here you have Joe's SEO version 1 releases. So I know I'm on 8.9.20. That's when Joe's SEO exploded. It broke the latest version from January 25 because their constraint management is not working or is not being taken care of. I know I can move to 9.1.14, but I will need to use one of these two versions of the module that are very close to November 17, 2021. This is a year later, so I went with 1.7. So what do? You go to your composer, find the module, and lock it to that version. Until when? Until you move up here, and I did not record that, but at some point you're going to be on a Drupal 9 version that is 2022. And that's the moment where you can move this module to 1.8. And remember I mentioned keep a document of what you're doing? This is the kind of things that you're documenting. I had to log Joe's SEO. So now we know that Joe's SEO is not going to be moved by Composer, but by you, depending on the dates. And you just time travel core and the modules you logged through time. If they are problematic, they should all leave at the same time that you are, 2021 in this case. So, do a systematic approach, document your code, your APIs. All of this I already mentioned, but I see we're running out of time, and I wanted to show you this beauty. I've been working on a Salesforce ECA integration module. It's a sub-module in the Salesforce module, but I just copy the code, put it here, told Cloud Desktop. Always use the file system MCP to look for the code. Here is where the code is located. And I just ask it. I just put the code, didn't say anything. Check the code for custom modules, tell me what it does. And it starts going, and it's very interesting. It'll find the module, it'll discover that there is a custom, it found the module info information, and then it goes to, I need to see if there are services defined, I found a class, I have an ECA plugin in the module, I'm gonna take a look at it, and it starts reading, and you can see what it's reading, the code, and then it tells me, oh, you have a Salesforce ECA module description, module that basically has some event subscribers, and it's telling me what event subscriber, that is creating some ECA events, that is creating some custom actions, and it actually understood what the module is doing. But the best part for updates is you need to document all those APIs, right? So I ask it, do an inventory of contrib, core, and remote APIs used in the module. And it does. It uses the Salesforce module, it uses the Salesforce push module for the push event, it uses the Salesforce mapping, tell me where it's referenced, use the ECA, and it also tells me from Drupal core, I'm using entity type manager interface and entity interface. So now I know if this is a custom module in my code and I'm updating, I need to be aware of any change record on entity interface. Form state interface is being used, service, it just detected everything. And at the end, it shows me what classes and everything is used from Salesforce or the other modules. So it sounds daunting to have that inventory, especially I have a customer that has 37 modules, custom modules, but I found that Cloud API, and you can do one of those root code for Visual Code Studio, but then you are paying for the API. Here I'm just paying my $17 a month with the MCP, and it really reads your code, and it really gets to a good understanding. So this is how you can create that little inventory, and I've been meaning to try and see if it finds the change record for each one of those, because it might. But anyway, always have a testing path, and it's a critical path. Not you ask if I was saying do all the tests. No, do the critical test, right? Like if it's the about us is going to give you an error, and you're updating from 8 to 10, you can live with that because you need to get to 10. It's more important to get to 10 than somebody sees the CEO picture. But if you have a rental, like it's my customer that have a rental module for trailers, probably that's what we need to test. That's what we need to make sure it works. So find your critical paths. Remember the old GANs that we find the critical path? Same idea. What is your critical path of testing? What are the things that you cannot release to production if they're not working, that impact your bottom line? Anyway, content workflows, team compatibility, that is a big one because teams can change, especially because everybody uses Bootstrap Barrio, and that has changed a lot. And honestly, doesn't follow best practices that much, so can be very problematic. And what integration points you have. That depends on your custom modules. So remember, the heart of this is the version release date matching. You live in one time and keep everything at that time. You don't need to do all your modules or all your contrib because in 90% of the cases, Composer is going to help you. If the module maintainer is good, they're marking the one that is Drupal 8 correctly. And make sure your workflow is correct and that you are releasing updates by themselves. Do not make them part of some developer sprint. They need to go full circle. So I said, I don't think I have time to see upgraded status, but put it in your sites, bring upgraded status, take a look at what it shows you. It's going to show you your environment. It's going to show you modules that you have in the code and are not using and you can remove. It's going to show you modules that you have, but it didn't detect that they are upgradable. So just go find. That usually happens when the module went major versions between major versions of Drupal. And it's going to show you your custom modules, allows you to do a scan, and it will tell you what is going to explode. And it's, I would dare to say, almost 95% correct. And some of them actually can do it. And if you have a complaint about the tools behind that, go find Mike Glaman, which is the guy that did some of those, and argue with him. But anyway, Drupal change records are important. Issue queues are important. Keep an eye on the issue queue, especially if you are using patches. You need to change the patch, or maybe just take it out. And core announcements, in case there are some special upgrades. They are very good nowadays in telling you, don't upgrade here unless you do this. And that's it. Any questions?
Not a question, but I really disagree on your absolute rule of not using a patches directory, and also suggesting people use a merge request URL as the patch. That latter bit is a giant security risk. Relying on a dynamic merge request, which could be changed by anyone, will break your site, because if the issue changes direction, the approach might change. You're working on experimental code. If you do use patches directory locally in your code base, what you want to do is take the merge request as it is, download it into your patches directory, and that's a snapshot. That's your stable point of that patch. And, if you do use a patches directory, you always do want to make sure that code lives on Drupal.org in a merge request now, or as a patch.
You're right. And when I created this presentation, in my mind is people like you or me, or that had lots of experience doing into the code, don't have a problem with that. But the reality of Drupal, and this is one of the disconnections that we have in Drupal that bugs me, is we assume every customer and everybody has advanced development and understand advanced development and is going to understand Composer very clearly, and that is not true. So yes, when I said do that, I'm thinking more on easiness of the update. But you're right, there are some dangers. Now, if you decide to use a patches module, I should add, and I will, also keep an inventory. Where did you get the patch? At what time did you get the patch? Because I've seen code bases where they have the patches folder and it says Drupal core patch. Yeah. Okay, what are you patching? Is the new version already has that patch in or not? Is that still valid? is that still the right approach or not? And also, I will say, if you're going to patch your module for your Drupal core, even if you follow all that, you still are in trouble. Because why are you patching that? And sometimes there is no real reason. Like, oh no, it's that gave me an error when I moved this little button. Like, don't patch Drupal core for that. Make sure you know why you did it, and make sure you have a correct reason. And it's really, look, my business will not work without this patch. I cannot make money on my website if I don't have this patch. Those are the patches that should make it into your code base. It gave me a horrible color. That's not it. Okay.
We need to end so the next
Yes.
speaker can set up.
If you have any more questions, I'll be around. Thank you.